So today we are excited to be doing a video on the Picklemeister, lactic acid fermentation. So a lot of people remember pickles in a barrel at the hardware store. These are your old-fashioned lactic acid fermented pickles. And the Picklemeister makes it really easy. We've got your instructions here, and they've got some nice recipes and some color pictures, kind of a good reference guide. Leave them on the counter while you're working, and that goes really well. All right, we've got everything that you need in here to get started except for the ingredients. We've got your double bubble airlock, you've got your spacer lid as a weight, and we've got your silicone plug to go in the lid once your pickles are finished, and they can go in the refrigerator like so. And I'll cover a little bit more on that later. All right, let's go ahead and set some of these other things aside, and we'll just go ahead and get to some of the ingredients. So we've got cucumbers, and cucumbers are the main ingredient. It's very important to get fresh. I prefer organic, and you want to go ahead and just kind of inspect them a little bit if you're buying them or if you're growing them in the garden. Just make sure that you've got your tip cleaned real well here, your flowering tip, and you can just trim it off a little bit. If you're using homegrown especially, you can get some bug damage on the sides. Just make sure that that's scrubbed. If it's too bad, you can go ahead and discard that, because if you're getting some bug damage on the side and it's maybe a little loose or a little grungy looking, let me go ahead and pull one of these out that may have a little bit here. You can see just a little bit. That can allow enzymes to go to work not only on that pickle but on the rest, and you can get some kind of slimy pickles or just not crisp. Anyways, keep that in mind, and I think that's one of the biggest detriments to pickles is not having fresh and getting little enzymes. But anyways, all right, fresh dill. I definitely prefer fresh dill. You can get away with dill seeds. If you use dried dill seeds, I do recommend that maybe you tie them in a little muslin bag or put them in a tea bag, because otherwise they tend to cause a lot of bubbles, and they will try to really bubble up in your jar and just cause problems with the fermentation. So it's not good to put loose dill in there. Okay, your garlic, about five cloves of garlic is really ideal. If you put more than that, it can actually, instead of getting more garlicky flavor, you can get some of the sulfur flavor. So let's go ahead and move on from there. I prefer sea salt. Sea salt, you get a lot of extra minerals in there, and that's definitely a preferred over your other types of salt. Water, definitely make sure and use non-chlorinated water. If you've got chlorinated water is all that you have, leave it sitting out on the counter overnight or bring it to a boil. Okay, another note on the water is a lot of people will, because you're wanting to keep everything as clean as possible so that you don't have any possibility for other bacteria or bad bacteria to get into your pickles and cause them to spoil while they're fermenting. So some people will boil the water to kind of sterilize it. They may even sterilize some of your utensils, and also heating the water allows the salt to dissolve into the water. So to me, I have not found that there's really much trouble. I don't run into a lot of trouble with bad bacteria, and the salt, it doesn't dissolve, but that works out fine for me. So just keep that in mind. You'll see as I pour the salt in and everything that doesn't quite dissolve, but that works out pretty well. So let's go ahead and get to the assembly and to stuffing the jar, and you'll kind of see some techniques that make it go a little bit smoother. So on the garlic, let me go ahead and peel these garlic. This is some homegrown garlic. It's not aged very much, so those skins are really sticky. Something I do recommend is they've got a silicone garlic peeler. Fantastic, check that out. Okay, so the garlic is ready, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of, and sometimes I'll even put these in whole. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to kind of slice up 2 of these just to kind of spread the flavor around a little bit, and then the other 3 I'll just put in whole, and I like to eat those. Those make a good condiment there. So, and that's actually, there's a couple of good recipes in an ebook that you can check out, even for garlic, for fermenting the whole garlic. Now, this dill, I'll just kind of go ahead and pull the heads down, and I want to go ahead and bruise it just a little bit, just to bring a little bit of that flavor out. So I'll just kind of use the end of a wooden spoon or something and just bruise it up a little bit. Don't have to go crazy, just a little bit. And then I'll go ahead and just throw one of those down in the bottom. Maybe I'll throw two and just kind of work from there. And dill, once again, that's really right after the cucumbers. That's a really important ingredient, and the fresher that is. If you've never grown dill, dill is very easy to grow, and I highly recommend. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to go ahead and fill the jar. You can see that there's some techniques. If you stand them up, and then you just kind of move around in motion, and then as you get your first level going, then you can just poke the other ones down inside. We'll go ahead and speed this video up as I'm working, but you can kind of get an idea for what we're looking at. Okay, so I've got my first level done, so I'm going to drop some of this garlic in there, and the recipe calls for 5 pounds, and that's really the ideal amount. Depending on your size, that will vary. I've only got about 4 1/4, so I'm going to be a little bit shy. So what I'm going to do is, normally I would be putting some of these in, different ends up, and then I can force these down kind of in between. Once again, not bruising the pickles or the cucumbers, because that can create a soft and a non-crunchy pickle. So don't go crazy on that, but you can definitely get more in that way. So I'm not going to really go and worry about that too much, since I am a little shy on my cucumbers anyway. So I'll move on to the next layer here. Getting another, I'll go ahead and put 2 of my dill heads in here. And you can see I'm just kind of flopping them in there. There's no real perfect way to put them in there. If I spread them out, maybe I'll get a little bit more flavor. So I'll be back and get this next layer in. Alright, so there we go. Got our jar just about full, and you can see if I'd had 5 pounds, I'd got a few more in there, and I would have packed them tight. We've got some more room down here. And do notice I started with my larger ones, and that way you can get your smaller ones to kind of push down in there. I do prefer to have a full jar. I feel like that makes really the best pickles, but you can make half a jar. And this brings us to the point of weights, which is very important, especially if you do not have a full jar. So include it when you buy the Picklemeister as a kit. You may recall that we went over the what was included. It was a spacer lid, and what the spacer lid basically is it's basically a weight. And so it sits right in here, upside down. And so we would fill the water into our jar, which we'll do here in just a second, and then we'll insert this in, and that will keep anything submerged under the brine, which is very important. That's the probably the number 2 issue with making pickles. The first was not having ideal cucumbers, and then this is allowing something to poke up above the brine. So this works very well, but it's much easier. You really prefer, if you're using the spacer cap, to make a full jar of pickles. Now, let's say you didn't. Let's say you wanted to make a half jar of pickles. You would need to come up with some way to submerge them. So there are some just basic ideas that you probably got in your kitchen, or you can also check out our website. This right here is really ideal. It's a weight, and it actually sits right in there. You can see it's the basic same principle. It sits right down there in the rim, and it's ideal because it's almost the same diameter. In fact, and sometimes they'll want to just kind of catch a little bit, so don't force it. If it catches, just take your 2 thumbs or 2 fingers and just kind of rotate it around and just kind of let it sit in there. If it does touch, don't force it. All right, so you can see that right there works really amazing with this quantity of pickles. And if you do have a small dish in your kitchen, you are welcome to use that. I want to point out, don't use something metallic, even if it is stainless. Some of the other brands use a stainless, and I would much rather use the plastic or a ceramic or glass type item. So if you are using glass, make sure that it's glazed all the way around, because you don't want anything to be getting in there. But anyways, so even though this right here is smaller diameter, you could use that. You just need to make sure that your pickles are partially holding down anything in there. Now, another thing, and a lot of people are buying these guys, and they're all different kinds of weights that are out there on the market that people are using. All right, so some of these have really cool features, but let's go ahead and start with just a basic one. These basic ones are fairly small in diameter, and they work really well not only in the Picklemeister in the gallon sizes, but also in the quart sizes. This one right here would tend to be like for your narrow mouth, and you would really only need one of these in a narrow mouth jar. If you're, say, using these smaller sizes, a lot of people will just take and use multiple ones of them in a wider mouth jar. So just, you know, if you've got some of these, or if you're looking at purchasing them, you can check out our website. Offer just about all these weights that you'll be seeing here. We offer. Now you've also got here, you've got the for the larger, for the wide mouth, and so they work great. Or once again, in the gallon, you just put multiple in them and you kind of overlap them like so, and keep everything held down. And I may do an example of that for you in just a second. Then we've got some of these larger ones, and these are even better because they're heavier. So especially if you're making sauerkraut, that will give you a little bit. You can see they're thicker and what have you. But they usually come in a 4-pack, and just watch out when you're purchasing these, because people will offer different amounts in their packs and different thicknesses. So some people think that they're getting a really good deal when they're buying these thinner ones, and for some people these thinner ones are all that they need. But anyways, I don't want to get too long-winded here. This right here is a hexagonal, and we offer that, and it actually is a good option for your gallon jars. Some people don't like it because you can allow stuff to pop up around the edges. I don't find that is too bad of a problem. But anyways, all right, an awesome feature of these guys are weights that have handles on them, and we offer those as well. Do watch out, because some of these have got this rim inside. Some people prefer that, some people don't. It can allow air to get kind of trapped up in there, and some people that really aggravates. I don't find that that's too much of a problem. This right here is probably the nicest weight that we offer, and it's really cool. It's got a handle, so you can kind of put that into the jar, and then you don't really have any finagling with the knife or what have you to get it out, and you can just set that right in. You can see for a wide mouth jar that's very close fitting. It's got a rounded bottom, so you don't really have any air getting trapped in there. So, all right, that covers the weights. So let's go ahead and get to filling this jar, and I'll go ahead and show you how maybe some of these weights, just one or two, would differ. Alrighty, I'm gonna reach over here and grab a jar. So I prefer to mix my salt and my water just in, you can use a jar or a bowl. I'll do the 5 quarts, and this, or 5 tablespoons. And this is not critical. You don't have to round them or not. You can use 6 if you would prefer. You can go down to 4. It's not critical. The main thing is that you get enough salt in there. It's not critical, but the main thing is to get enough salt in there that you get a little bit of preserving from the salt going on before the lactic acid bacteria really kick in after a day or so. So that salt, some people will try to make, and you can make pickles with no salt. Most people really do not like the flavor, and you have more chance of maybe them going bad or being spongy or what have you. So you can see my salt did not really want to dissolve. That's fine. In the recipe, it states 6 cups of water. Now this is a very fluid, no pun intended, amount of water. You may not use that much, and you may use a little bit more. And the reason for that is just how tight you pack the cucumbers in here. So since I had a few more, or a few less pickles or cucumbers than it called for, I'm probably going to need to add just a little bit more water, and we will see that here in just a second. All right, so if I was using one of these other weights, that would probably be almost right. I would need just a little bit more. So you can see how these smaller weights, you need several of them in there to kind of weight these cucumbers down. You can see that they're kind of trying to jump up here. Also, when you use my dill was a little bit, I like it almost this ripe, but it was just a little bit even more too ripe. So you can see that I'm getting some of these seeds actually bubbling up. I'm not going to worry about that too much. All right, you've got the hexagonal. Once again, that right there would fit in there fairly well. And again, preferably your jar is going to be fairly full. If it's up about to your rim, it makes it easier to keep things kind of tidy and down. If you are, say, lower in your jar, you even on these hexagon or on your other items, even these larger weights like this, you're going to maybe need several of them to keep it down. So let's kind of go ahead and move on. So I want to, since I'm using this plastic lid that came with the Picklemeister, I'm just going to loosen these guys up just a little bit and add a little bit of extra water here so you can see how this will actually play out. So I'm going to top it off, and I can tell that I've got enough when I insert my lid, and once again, it's easy to grab it with your thumbs. And I want, when I put that in there, I want it to, the water to just barely bubble out when it is flush with the top of the jar. And let's see, so a little bit more. And you can see my pickles and stuff are floating up there, or cucumbers are floating up. So that right there is very, very close. In fact, that would probably work. My OCD is going to get me a little bit, so I'm going to add a little bit more. And yeah, very nice. So what I can do now is I can take my larger lid with the silicone and just screw that right down. Now I'm sure that everything is submerged in the brine, and if one of those seeds did pop up there, I'm not going to worry about it. That should be fine. I'll go ahead and take the double bubble airlock now and fill it up with water. And I think that this is kind of an area that a lot of people have a little bit of confusion on, is how these work and how critical this is. And it's really fairly basic. There's actually lines across here that say max, but you just want to, if they don't kind of bubble out to the same, you just kind of rotate and that fills them up. Now what happens is as we insert this into the jar, the pickles are putting off carbon dioxide, and that is going to make the pressure go down on this side, and as it does, it's going to allow it to bubble out on this side over here. And you will see that happening as it works throughout the days. Now I'm going to go ahead and push this down into the silicone, and I believe in the recipe book this is actually something, it says push it in until it stops. And that is not really what that means. More than anything is just push it until you get a little bit of pressure. You don't really, if people push it too far, they're like, oh, I need to push that in too far, and it will kind of get in there and go too far. You just want it to be barely into that silicone grommet. In fact, you can see I pushed that as kind of a demonstration. What will happen is you push that in and you can get some of that brine actually coming in there, and that's not what you want. If that happens, just go ahead and double it out and go like there. If you are looking for an upgrade to one of these right here are amazing because they give you a little bit more room for the liquid to bubble over into here, especially if you're using your dried dill seed or a little bit older pickles that tend to say bubble a little bit more. And I'm not sure why the older pickles do, or certain times of the year, but they do, and that gives you more of a reservoir inside. So do keep that in mind. We'll go ahead and screw this back on, and I have gone ahead and just inserted that. Let me go ahead and show you what that looks like on the inside. All right, see, so you just barely have that stuck in there. Now, if these pickles are a little bit older, or if it's the time of the year where you're fermenting at a little bit higher temperature, and I'll get into the temperature that we want to leave this at now, you're going to get a lot of bubbling going on. This bubbling can fill up in there, and it can, especially if you don't get this, tightened or whatever, you can get some coming up into here, or even squeezing out the side. People will have trouble. So you do want to check and make sure that your seal is kind of clean. Just run your finger. But if that happens, not the end of the world. I always recommend that you set your Picklemeister on a plate, just so if you do get some leakage, it doesn't leak onto your counter or onto anything else. So keep all of that in mind. If you do get some of this brine coming up into your airlock, just pull your airlock off. Make sure that your hands are clean. Put a damp cloth over that. Just rinse your double bubble airlock up, put it back on. You're good to go. And okay, so let's get to temperatures. So you can basically take this Picklemeister now, set it on your plate, and preferably put it in a dark place, or I'll just wrap a towel around the outside, like so. Now, you can go ahead and check it, and you'll know that it is working by if this is bubbling through. About 70 degrees, 68 to 70 degrees are your ideal temperatures. Now, if your house is not that temperature, it's not the end of the world. Some people will take them and they'll put them in a basement, root cellar, any of that works. If you don't have an ideal temperature, go ahead. If you've got an air conditioner or vent, you can set a box over that with this in there and just kind of adjust your temperature like so. Nothing horrible is going to happen if you have a little bit lower than that or a little bit higher. Basically, the higher the temperature, you are going to get faster fermenting going on. But what can happen, and you can actually see that in this jar of pickles right here, is you'll tend to get maybe a little bit more of this cloudy buildup on them. Also, usually if it's not ideal temperature, maybe a little bit less chance for them being as crunchy and just that type of things. Just more errors. The further away from that temperature that you get between the 65 and the 70, you've got more chance for errors to go on. So one thing to remember also that I forgot to mention is make sure and kind of pop your jar a little bit, and because you don't want any excess bubbles in there. Once again, that's just more air that has to come out. All right, so we've got our these ones have been in there about 4 days. These ones right here have actually been in the refrigerator. I mean, they fermented a full 10 days and then went in the refrigerator. These ones are the ones that we just started. Make sure and keep in mind that your time frame is mostly just going to determine how much doneness you like. So what I prefer to do is I'll taste one. You're welcome to taste one after, say, a week and see if it's done to your liking. If you notice, another thing is when you put this in the refrigerator, after they're done, you take them off the counter, you put them in the refrigerator, the liquid is actually going to lower. That cooling them down actually draws some of this liquid, some of your brine, into the pickles. To me, they taste more done after a day in the refrigerator than they do when you're done. So just keep that in mind. But here's a very big thing to keep in mind. If you do that, you either need to eat out a few of these right here or add a little bit of salt brine to it, because even after they're done in the refrigerator, you want them to be submerged below the brine. Keep that in mind. A lot of times I make multiple jars. I'll just take out of one of my last jars and just top it up with some of that brine. If you want to keep these for very long, they'll keep for a year in the refrigerator and they'll be as crisp, as long as you're keeping them below that brine. One trick that you can do, make sure that your brine is topped up over the top of them, and then you can just float maybe a couple tablespoons of olive oil over the top. That'll even create a little bit more of an oxygen barrier there. So really good idea as far as that goes. But get them in the refrigerator. Some people, you can leave them out of the refrigerator. That's a question that we get a lot. And but basically just your quality is going to decrease faster and what have you. The cooler your temperature, obviously above freezing, is more ideal. So a lot of people they'll put them in a basement if they've got a really cool basement or a root cellar or something like that. So all right, so I'm about to wrap up, but I did mention earlier that I was going to point out some of the benefits of the double bubble airlock. So there's all kinds of new contraptions not involving the airlock and all this different stuff. I prefer them. You can always keep track of how your fermentation is going by if they're bubbling, and it doesn't really allow any additional pressure to build up in here. Some of the silicone airlocks, the fancy ones that you see that don't have the airlock on there, that actually increases the pressure in your jar just slightly. That kind of infuses some of that carbon dioxide into the pickles. Now, it's not the end of the world, but I just tend to notice that they aren't quite as crunchy as you can get with just these standard old airlocks. So keep that in mind. Fancy's nice, but sometimes the old standards you can't really improve upon them. So I'll go ahead and close out. As you can see, really easy. About 5 to 10 days, depending on your temperature, depending on how well done you like your pickles, you will have pickles. Just the same kind that you would get out of a barrel in an old general store. Kind of amazing. And nowadays, there's so many health benefits. You've got to go and search that out for yourself. But a lot of doctors are recommending, yogurt and that type of thing. Might be a similar type thing with these. So that's kind of a cool thought. Anyways, check out our website. Check out the varying weights and everything. You can check those out. I always have a lot of fun fermenting. It's not only delicious foods to share with your family, but it's fun. I enjoy it. So again, like our channel, subscribe, comment, and check out our website. We'll see you on the next video.